This week, Jackson explores Nintendo's curious strategy release, Code Name S.T.E.A.M. We head to the movies for a bit of disaster porn with a look at San Andreas, and I wonder why Marvel Heroes has somehow slipped under the radar for 2 years. This is Player Attack. Hi, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this week Bethesda confirmed something we all knew as fact. War. War never changes.
It's all over, but the cry.
With the world poised on the brink of war, Vault-Tec is reporting a record number.
But we.
Folks, it seems we've got some breaking news. Stand by.
It's all over. No, I'm trying to forget about how much I care for you.
We seem to have lost contact with our affiliate stations. Stand by. We do have coming in confirmed reports of nuclear detonations. My God. Our soldiers were right. War never changes.
Of course, we are talking about Fallout 4, which is officially headed to PS4, Xbox One and Windows PC, with rumours suggesting we might be back in the vault as early as this year. This time, the post-apocalyptic franchise is set in Boston, and while we have heard a few early quibbles about the art style, overall it seems people are pretty happy with what we've seen so far. More updates, of course, at E3, when Bethesda is set to host its first ever pre-show press conference. With the big show just a few days away now, everybody is taking bets on just what will be revealed. Normally, we'd be full of all sorts of great expectations, but this year it seems like a lot of the big announcements have already been made. We figured that Fallout 4 would be an expo reveal, but no. We also thought that Sony would keep its next big remake under wraps, but instead we've already been told all about Uncharted: The Nathan Drake Collection, which is headed to PS4 by the end of the year. It's exactly what you'd expect, a polished up revamp of the first 3 Uncharted games for the new console, bringing each one up to 1080p and 60 FPS. If you're an Uncharted fan but think you'll be able to resist this next-gen cash-in, think again. The Nathan Drake Collection is also shipping with a beta code for Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, so if you want to get in early on the next one, you might just have to pick the first 3 up again. Similarly, while we haven't heard anything more about the rumoured Gears of War collection, we do know to expect some sort of news about the franchise. Development studio Black Tusk Studios has officially received a facelift in the lead up to the big reveal, with former Epic dev Rod Ferguson proudly introducing the Coalition. One thing that we didn't really expect to hear about at E3, and certainly didn't expect to hear about before the expo, was Dark Souls 3, and yet, here we are. Rumours are swirling that From Software is already working on the next game in the franchise, with the exciting news that Hidetaka Miyazaki is back at the helm. At this stage, Namco is keeping very quiet on the topic, but hey, we're certainly not going to complain if a new one is announced, so stay tuned to news coming out of Sony during E3 week. Moving right away from E3 for now, we actually have some really good news from Kickstarter. Indie developer Two Awesome Studio has recovered beautifully from its recent crowdfunding drama, with the second campaign for Dimension Drive reaching its goal with nearly 2 weeks left to go. The game's original funding drive was sabotaged at the last minute by someone using a stolen credit card to make a generous €7,000 pledge. Kickstarter was forced to reverse the donation just 30 minutes before the end of the campaign, meaning Two Awesome Studios fell short of their goal. This time, the €30,000 goal was reached, and the team has even hit a number of its stretch goals. Destiny fans should pat themselves on the back as Bungie donates more than $1.026 million to help Nepal recover from this year's terrible earthquakes. The money was raised through sales of a unique t-shirt as well as in-game items, with player contributions supplemented by a $50,000 pledge from Activision as well as $50,000 from the Bungie Foundation. Meanwhile, the first batch of games have been added to the World Video Game Hall of Fame. From a seriously impressive shortlist of candidates, the judging panel has managed to pare it back down to just 6. The lucky inductees? Pong, Pac-Man, Super Mario Bros., Tetris, Doom, and World of Warcraft. These games were judged according to 4 criteria: icon status, longevity, geographical reach, and the somewhat nebulous influence. You can check them out at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. There's also some rather unusual news out of 2K Games this week, with the revelation that the My Career story mode for NBA 2K16 has been written by acclaimed film director Spike Lee. It's part of the game's dedication to make the game more of a real story when NBA 2K16 launches in September for PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PC. And speaking of PC, Valve has made a couple of big announcements this week too. Firstly, it seems to have backflipped on its controversial refund policy. That is, the policy that would not provide refunds for any reason. Now, customers are offered a refund for nearly any purchase on Steam for just about any reason. This means that if the game doesn't work, or your PC doesn't meet the minimum specs, or you accidentally click the wrong button, or you simply don't like the thing, you can tell Valve and get your money back. There are supposed to be restrictions on this. Valve claims that it's only handing out refunds if you played the game for less than 2 hours and it's been in your library for less than 2 weeks. But we've already heard reports of months-old games with tens of hours on the clock being handed back for a refund of the purchase price. Looks like there might be a little bit of work yet to be done on that one. At the same time, we're hoping that Valve has put a little more effort into ironing out the bugs in its Steam machines, with the first ones due on shelves by the end of this year in North America and Europe. Several manufacturers, including Alienware and Cyberpower, have unveiled their models and opened pre-orders. If you don't see one you like, there are other manufacturers working on their own machines with different aesthetics and price points, so you don't need to rush out quite yet. And finally this week, Microsoft has confirmed we will be seeing more of Lara Croft at E3 2015, releasing a brand new cinematic trailer for Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Throughout history, the boldest have dared to go further. They risk death, and in doing so live on forever. What drives these few to the ends of the earth? The desire to discover something more. The search for something greater. The world is full of unanswered questions. Beyond all limits or reason, the answers await.
The sequel to 2013's Tomb Raider is officially a timed Xbox One exclusive, meaning it's the only place you'll get the game this holiday season, and it looks like Microsoft is planning on showing it off properly in the months leading up to launch. For more information on any of these stories, or to keep up to date with the latest gaming news, head to playerattack.com. But for now, stick around, I've got plenty more still to come. I have a confession to make. I am a sucker for a B-grade action disaster movie. If it can possibly be described as so bad it's good, I'm right there with the popcorn. So it makes sense that I was looking forward to San Andreas being more of the same. I mean, it's just disaster porn with a bigger budget. But apparently I set my sights too high even for that. If there is a disaster movie drinking game out there, and I'm pretty sure there's got to be at least one, San Andreas hits so many familiar notes you'll be seeing double before the earthquake even hits. Because, of course, there's an earthquake. It's the big one, and it's going to hit California, and you could probably have figured that one out from the title. As with all good disaster flicks, there is enough impressive sciencey sounding jargon thrown into the mix to keep most cinema goers happy. Seismologists have made a breakthrough, a way to predict earthquakes by looking at magnetic waves. And, of course, this discovery is made just before the big one rumbles to life, set to hit not only Los Angeles, but also San Francisco, which lies on the same fault line. Now, obviously, there is a certain suspension of disbelief that must be taken into the cinema for any film, particularly a disaster movie, but San Andreas requires a little more than most. There are a couple of key concepts you need to fully embrace before settling in to watch San Andreas. The first is probably an obvious one. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is Superman. He's capable of doing everything, being in the right place at the right time, and still being emotional enough to offer a really big hug to anyone who needs it. The second, the health and well-being of one particular family unit is more important than doing one's job, respecting other people's property, or potentially looking after the health and well-being of countless other random civilians. Now that we've got those bits sorted, we can start looking at the film itself. Dwayne Johnson plays Army rescue helicopter pilot Ray. Ray and his wife Emma, the wonderful Carla Gugino, are getting a divorce, and she's about to move in with her new boyfriend Daniel, who is very rich, but a bit of a dick. The couple's college-aged daughter, Blake, apparently wants nothing more than for her parents to get back together. So while the family subplot is pretty much what you'd expect, there is a nice little twist that Blake is anything but a damsel in distress. It seems that rescue pilot Dad taught her a thing or two about survival to the point where she is shown consistently to be the one doing the rescuing rather than the one in need of help. Blake thinks on her feet, shows a good knowledge of both first aid and technology, and does not hesitate to take charge when the situation calls for it. The inclusion of such a strong female character is a refreshing change in what's typically a fairly testosterone-fueled genre. Also countering the traditional masculinity is the fact that Blake's travelling companion Ben is far from the buff hero type you might expect, and joining the pair is Ben's little brother Ollie, providing comic relief and a surprising voice of reason in the face of impending doom. But people aren't really going to go watch San Andreas for the characters. They're going to go watch it for The Rock, who, as we've mentioned, is ridiculously overpowered and therefore awesome, or for the disaster itself, which is also fairly overpowered. The CG is outstanding, with Los Angeles skyscrapers collapsing into dust following the big one, and San Francisco's skyline crumbling like so many sandcastles in the face of a geographically suspect tsunami. Expect the usual cliches here. The Hollywood sign is a surprisingly early casualty, and plenty of early shots of landmarks and suburbs being reduced to flaming rubble. If a building collapses and doesn't burst into flames, did it ever really exist? My advice for San Andreas is probably to skip this one in the cinemas unless you really want something mindless to go with your popcorn. Instead, wait for it to come out on DVD, stock up on snacks, and invite your best mates around for that drinking game I mentioned earlier. You can thank me later.
It's time to bust some heads.
You're forgiven for not being completely familiar with Marvel Heroes. The free-to-play MMO celebrates its second birthday this month, but even for comic book fans, it seems to have flown under the radar for the most part. And that's a great pity. Marvel Heroes is kind of amazing. Officially known now as Marvel Heroes 2015, this is one of the new breed of free-to-play MMOs. You don't pay anything up front, and you have access to all the content without any purchases or subscription required. You can play your chosen hero from level 1 up to the current maximum level of 60 through the storyline, and or by playing various challenge modes without coughing up a cent. The game plays like other action RPGs you might be familiar with, like Diablo, or the more recent MOBA titles. Left click for your main attack, right click for a secondary, and use hotkeys A to H for additional attacks or tactics. You can freely assign any of your chosen abilities to each slot, so you can choose a setup that works for you. Each character has their own set of skills to invest points into as you progress, and some even have additional mechanics unique to the class. Magneto has a debris meter, for example, that represents just how much random metallic junk he's holding in reserve for hurling at enemies or forging into immobilizing cages. Everyone also has their unique signature ability, which is usually immensely powerful, but with a longer cooldown period between uses than the regular abilities. The storyline follows a nefarious plot by Dr. Doom to take over the world, or destroy the world, or give everyone cooties. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't really matter. You need to stop him and the various other villains that try to stop you from stopping Doom. It's pretty much what you'd expect from a comic book plot, but it is fun to follow along, and there are some wonderfully illustrated cutscenes between missions. Of course, if you don't want to follow the plot, you can branch out immediately to various challenge modes and patrol missions. These patrol missions let you cruise around and fight crime set in a larger open plan level with about a dozen other heroes. Every few minutes, a special event will start, which might just be a supervillain in need of a beatdown, or a number of civilians that need saving, or an invasion of genetically and technologically modified dinosaurs. Yes, really, dinosaurs. You can fight dinosaurs as Iron Man. There's even a version of the popular Horde mode game type where you need to defend Professor Xavier's mansion from wave after wave of bad guys who are trying to kill the students. Let too many students die, it's game over. Character-wise is where Marvel Heroes really starts to get interesting. Unlike other games based in an already established world, you're not forced to create your own unique character. Instead, you can step straight into the familiar boots of some big-name heroes or villains. There are more than 100 characters available in the game, including a massive lineup of both heroes and villains. Of course, there are the super popular ones like Iron Man and Wolverine and Hulk, but there's also lesser known heroes like Black Panther, Cable, X-23 and Squirrel Girl, who throws squirrels at things. You start out with a starter character, and that roster changes regularly, and then you earn in-game points to unlock your favourite characters. These points, called Eternity Splinters, are earned during play, and you will need to play quite a bit as your starting hero to earn enough for a second character. But logging in each day will eventually reward you with a bundle of splinters, shortening the process considerably. Don't like the sound of that? Here is where Gazillion does start looking at digging into your pockets. You can buy individual heroes or bundles, like all the Avengers or all the X-Men, outright for cash. You can also buy individual heroes inside the game using G currency, which you can buy for real money. The only thing that seems to require spending real money is expansions for your stash. And you will probably want to buy a bigger stash because with so many characters, there's a ton of loot you might want to save. You can get by without it though if you absolutely do not want to spend a cent. Everything else, it looks like you can either purchase in-game or get lucky, and you can find it in various ways. There might be some alternate costumes you can only purchase with real money, but only if you really want a specific one, and the prices are not unreasonable. Mind you, some of the costumes are more than just a lick of paint. Female Thor is playable via costume, as is a female Deadpool. With second anniversary celebrations held throughout June, it seems as good a time as any to jump in and try Marvel Heroes. It's a bunch of fun, and you really can play it without spending a cent. And you can be Iron Man, which is really the only reason you actually need.
London, a modern utopia, thanks to exciting advances in steam technology. Even now, steam vehicles crowd London's fair streets beyond capacity, which is why we are all looking forward to today's event, the grand opening of the Steamgate Bridge.
The physicist Enrico Fermi once asked, "Where is everybody?" in relation to the lack of detectable alien life in the universe. The universe is pretty friggin' huge and pretty friggin' old, which besides spawning a whole lot of your mama jokes in the late 90s, is as good a reason as any as to why we haven't been invaded by now. And let's be frank too, I mean, any invading race would probably wipe us out in a heartbeat from afar. We are out around there, the Death Star. Conversely, we have Code Name S.T.E.A.M, the newest turn-based strategy title from Intelligent Systems, which suggests any alien menace that invades planet Earth will be met with harsh resistance in the form of our greatest literary figures, led by a very youthful and importantly not dead Abraham Lincoln. S.T.E.A.M is a slight deviation from the standard Intelligent Systems formula, and works much more like the horrendously underrated Valkyria Chronicles than it does, say, Advance Wars or Fire Emblem. The deviation is a welcome one though. It has some drawbacks. The central tenet of S.T.E.A.M is exactly that, water vapour, which forms the action points allowing your team of 4 literary figures to traverse the map and perform their attacks. S.T.E.A.M is created by a boiler on the characters' backs that can be upgraded throughout the game by collecting specific items on each battlefield. A attacking enemies is less automated and more FPS than what you find in something like XCOM, where you line up your reticule and even land critical hits by specifically targeting the weak zones on enemies. Each character also gets a secondary weapon, with further weapons unlocked by collecting medals in game from downed enemies, and this adds a range of effects from being able to stun the enemies to shooting bananas or laying mines. One of the intriguing aspects of a turn-based strategy game is the distance it places between the player and the subservient units they control. In intelligent systems, other games, although they may try to place you as a character in the action, a la Fire Emblem Awakening, it often feels like there's a glass window between the player and the unit, sort of like you are the distant drone pilot and you're removed from the actual battlefield itself. Steam does go some way to ameliorating this aspect. The FPS style mechanics help, but it ultimately falls flat because of a largely wooden cast of characters that do little in the way of the narrative to differentiate themselves from one another. It's unfortunate considering the status of the source material. Steam does away with an overhead map entirely, which does seem like it would be bothersome. Indeed, it has been bemoaned by many. I actually thoroughly enjoy this design choice because it provides a sense of experimentation and exploration whenever you jump into a new map. It can be infuriating, as enemies at times are concealed, and as you run into their line of sight you are shot and then rendered immovable. However, this also provides some reason to come back to a map and then improve upon your previous attempt. A lot of the maps can be raced through at a much faster pace than the first time you first get into them. Often I went back to the start of a map after getting a good sense of the enemy layout, hiding spots and the secret gear. It does seem like this could be made redundant with an overhead map, but perhaps doing so would remove some of the intensity. What does, or rather did, as this aspect can now be sped up with a downloadable update, what does kill the momentum of the game somewhat is the excruciatingly long time it takes for enemy units to take their turn. While this has essentially been patched out by including a fast forward button, it just does hinder the flow of the game. It's one of those, to borrow some sports vernacular, coach killer game mechanics that will turn a lot of people off the game before they even get a chance to sink their fangs in. Getting enjoyment out of Steam actually comes down to what do you enjoy about turn-based strategy games. In the same vein as Enrico Fermi, would you prefer to be asking, where is everybody at the start of a mission, and experiencing the pitfalls on the limited range of vision, or would you prefer to be able to adequately load out and plan ahead of time, knowing the enemies that you encounter on each map? Steam joins a relatively shallow field of turn-based strategy games in this style. The mechanics are strong, but execution and pacing isn't anywhere near the level seen in a similar title, such as Valkyria Chronicles. It also doesn't have the same kind of, this is my squad, and I would die for them feel, nor the depth in terms of character progression that something like XCOM Enemy Unknown or even the more recent Massive Chalice are both built upon. In relation to turn-based strategy, we aren't too often asking, where is everybody? There are plenty of games within that universe worthy of your time. Steam is alien. Steam wants to be different enough to be alien. It's a hybrid with the best of intentions, I'm sure, but by untethering itself from the great games that came before it, it falls just short of being a truly great addition to the genre.
And that's about it for this edition of Player Attack. Thanks for watching. Next week, we're taking a moment to recover from E3 by taking a look back at the Australian games industry, a history that spans nearly 40 years. In the meantime, you can catch us on playerattack.com. We're on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. And if you've got something you want to say, send us an email, mailbox@playerattack.com, or just hop on our forums. Till next week, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this is Player Attack.